This is Drew Pearson with a news flash from Washington. Canada's Prime Minister Mackenzie King has informed President Truman of a very serious situation affecting our relations with Russia.
The year is 1945, and World War II is over. A four-year alliance of necessity between the communist Soviet Union and the democracies of the West is about to be tested.
So there was a kind of wartime sense of a good buddy relationship between Canada and the Soviet Union. There was even a Canadian-Soviet Friendship Society that was formed, which, if I recall rightly, the Prime Minister Mackenzie King was the honorary patron of. I think there was a hope, certainly, that there could be a continuation of the wartime alliance into the post-war period. No sense of kind of impending doom, no anticipation that there would be a Cold War.
During the war, the need to support the besieged Soviet Union sees the National Film Board of Canada promoting the alliance. Communists have become beneficial wartime friends.
And as together with our Russian neighbors, we face the coming years, we met in determination, we march on friends, in fact, in spirit, and in purpose.
This wartime propaganda does not apply to Canada's communists. Members of the Communist Party of Canada remain a threat to democracy and internal security. The repressive measures of the RCMP are not suspended because of a film board production. Party members were viewed with suspicion on the signing of the Nazi-Soviet Non-Aggression Pact of 1939 and the party's suspension of its support for the Canadian war effort. Members were immediately declared enemies, and hundreds were rounded up and interned. With the alliance victorious and fascism in ruins, the party re-emerges in the wake of the positive sentiment toward the Soviet Union. Communist Party member Fred Rose is elected as a member of Parliament. But this success did not quell opposition and suspicion to communism among Canadians.
Communism, I think, was still regarded in the Canadian public's imagination as a kind of underground force with a bit of Canadian presence in terms of a fairly underground Canadian Communist Party that they'd learned to mistrust.
Have you ever been a member of the Communist Party?
In the United States, authoritative action against communists has also stretched back several decades when the Russian Communist Revolution of 1917 inspires a wave of politically radical movements in America. Fueling the mass arrests, deportations, and prosecutions of communists during this period is a young FBI director, J. Edgar Hoover.
Hoover had sort of vaulted the FBI to public prominence in the 1920s and the 1930s on the basis of two different kinds of crusades. One was to kind of bust the mob, particularly in the 1930s, the effort to go out against organized crime, and a little earlier on in the 1920s to target the Red Menace.
2 decades later, Hoover looks to reignite American hysteria toward the Red Menace.
Communism in reality is not a political party. It is a way of life, an evil and malignant way of life. It reveals a condition akin to disease that spreads like an epidemic. And like an epidemic, a quarantine is necessary to keep it from infecting this nation.
He needed something after 1945 that would keep the FBI at the sort of pinnacle of its domestic power and maintain its role. It was natural then that he would want to target the FBI against the alleged communist menace. And of course, to add to the mix, Hoover regarded himself as the FBI, but he was the FBI.
I was awakened today with the most troubling news. Late last night, a cipher clerk at the Soviet embassy appeared at the Department of Justice, claiming the existence of a Soviet spy ring here in Canada. It was like a bomb on top of everything. Nobody can know where this news may lead.
The Gouzenko Affair was a great shock and surprise to him, as it was to the entire Canadian public. So he didn't have a sort of roadmap as to how to respond to it. He was concerned about a wide range of things, all of which suggested to him at least that he needed to take a very prudent, very cautious path in response.
After learning that the network of Soviet spies involves communists in Canada and America, King urgently travels to Washington to discuss the case with President Harry Truman.
After consulting with President Truman, we felt it best that this whole matter of Soviet espionage in North America remain confidential, so as not to disturb relations with our powerful ally.
As the wheels turned in his often complex mind, was the calculation about Canada-Soviet relations. And Mackenzie King, I think, again, didn't have a roadmap for the future about how he wanted to see the post-1945 world work out. But he certainly didn't want to have a big fight on his hands, an unequal fight on his hands with the Soviet Union. He was very concerned about how the Soviets would respond, and he wanted to really manage that relationship.
This news has the potential to shatter Canada's relationship with the Soviet Union. I fear that a revelation would cause a third Great War from Russia at the United States by way of Canada.
Returning to Ottawa, King files the case away and hopes that its secrecy will maintain the peace between the Allies. But the Gouzenko spy case will not disappear. In Washington, Hoover has adopted the case as the FBI's #1 priority and thinks that the Canadian government is practicing an absolutely spineless policy toward the communists. Hoover will use the case to bring the American communists involved to justice and create a sensation against communism in North America. Hoover places a call to NBC Studios in Washington. That evening, American journalist Drew Pearson broadcasts the news of Soviet espionage that Gouzenko revealed.
This is Drew Pearson with a news flash from Washington. Canada's Prime Minister Mackenzie King has informed President Truman of a very serious situation affecting our relations with Russia.
I am almost certain that the press gained their information from Mr. Hoover. He seemed to want to force the issue. That is the way a certain type of politics is played by a certain type of man.
Mackenzie King's hopes of a sustained relationship with the Soviet Union are lost. His fears of a great conflict with the Russians are becoming a reality. The Cold War is on the horizon.
To Trieste in the Adriatic, an iron curtain has descended across the continent.